Thank you very much, Luis and team, for having me and be sharing my story with you. I hope I can at least contribute to something to your companies. I'm going to base my conversation today on an article I just published in the Management Mix. I don't know if you're familiar with that. So if there are questions, you can go there and get more details, but hopefully I'll pick some pieces that are relevant for you. I'm going to start with something I've never done before. I will share with you an unfinished piece of work that hopefully will tell you a little bit about myself. They were asking about where do you come from. Personally, I come from the creativity side. I'm an architect by training, and I've been involved in arts for a long time, then shifting to business. And when we have the opportunity, I can share how the story unfolded. But I'm going to start with this treat for you, if you will. I'm living, I think, a great time in my life. Not only professionally, I love my job, and I don't have any reason to go anywhere else right now. But personally, I also have a great family life. I have 3 kids, and one time my wife was talking to me and saying, I wish I could really bottle this moment. We have 3 great kids. They're in a great stage of their life, and I wish I could just put that into something and can it so we can always come back to it. And that gave me an idea. It's a painting that I haven't finished, but I'm going to share it with you because I thought it was a good way to start today. So that's my youngest son, Mateo, and I'm attempting to bottle him in a jar. So it's unfinished. Hopefully it'll look a little better than this later. Thank you. I'll start by sharing with you that Whirlpool is not your Google. I think when you think about innovative companies, I'm sure that Whirlpool is not the first company that comes to mind. When you ask someone in the street what are the most innovative companies in the world, they'll always name Apple, they'll always name Google, so on and so forth. And I think the world of innovation is really about transforming established businesses, at least the one I am part of. And companies that are established, that have been around for a long time, are facing challenges to become relevant or to stay relevant in the marketplace. And that's really what Whirlpool's innovation story is about. If you go back to Whirlpool 100 years ago, we started with an innovation. We invented the washer. But with new competition, with consumer information, it becomes more and more challenging. And we've spent a lot of time at Whirlpool, over 10 years, thinking about how can we transform ourselves to become a company focused on consumer-driven innovation versus technology innovation, which was our heritage and was what we've been doing for a long, long time. And there's been a lot of material written about Whirlpool. A couple of the books that you see on the right side, Strategic Innovation and Unleashing Innovation, were written by Nancy Tennant. She's actually my boss. She's been in this journey for all this time, which is about 12 years. Myself and some of my colleagues are also active writers in some innovation forums. So we're always thinking about what is next in our innovation journey, and that's really what I'm charged with. A little bit about Whirlpool. Not everyone is familiar with Whirlpool. I think you all probably know. When you think about Whirlpool, it's a washer company with the Whirlpool brand. We're actually a little larger than that. We're about $18 billion. We're a global company in 171 countries. We have a number of brands. Some of the brands that you might not thought were part of Whirlpool are Maytag, which we acquired about 5 years ago, KitchenAid, which is one of our premium brands, Jenner, and then around the globe we have other brands like Consul. It's the brand in Brazil, which actually has a lot of equity from a consumer standpoint, and then we have newer brands like Gladiator that I'll talk about a little later. The chart doesn't look great on the screen. Basically, what this depicts is our innovation journey. And I'd like to think about our journey in 3 big phases. It's hard to think about, it's a continuum and it's an evolution. But you think about at least our innovation journey, we look at that in 3 big phases. The first one is really the burst, and is when we start. In any company, you have to find a place to start. And I'll talk about some of the things that I think you have to do to begin that journey. Then we have to scale it. And to do that, there are other things that we have to think about. How do you get it to the masses? And how does that become an enterprise capability? And once you scale it and everyone knows what they're supposed to do, things change, and you always have to fine-tune and adjust over time. And I'll share with you a point of view on these three phases during my presentation. I want to start with what I call the burst. And you know, I was talking to Jim last night from Goodyear, and you will not think that appliances and tires have a lot in common, but we realize we have a lot in common. And one of the things that was that commonality is that for consumers it's very difficult to make a choice. It's very difficult to find differentiation. And that was the ignition of our innovation journey when we started at Whirlpool. We, about 12 years ago, we had what we call the Sea of White. That's what we referred to as. And actually, even in today's world, you can refer to appliances as white goods. And you know, if you were a consumer, you will walk into a retailer and see that picture and probably not know where to go. So you will either go by price, or you will ask the sales associate, what do you recommend? And they will typically work on their incentives, so they might lead you to a brand. Maybe they have a deal of the day. So for us, it was very hard to become relevant in the space. And that's what really drove the innovation ignition, if you will, at Whirlpool to say, we really have to become differentiated from a consumer standpoint. And we have to really create demand for our products and not fulfill the demand. Okay? We need to give the consumers a reason to choose our brands and our products, and to really change them and not only wait until the appliance breaks so I can get the next one and get the deal of the day. But that reflected in the business. If you look at the average price point in the marketplace in the 90s, it was a significant drop year over year. And the drop was, what I'm showing you there is the average price point. And that's a reflection of what was happening in the market. So as a lot of competition was getting in, technologies were becoming more affordable, manufacturers would lower their cost or their price, and the only way for us to stay profitable was through operations, through efficiencies, so on and so forth. So this picture doesn't necessarily reflect the company's performance, but reflects what the consumer's value was in terms of our products. So when you think about the way to initiate, I think the first thing that you have to think is define the why, the what, and the how. And innovation is very linked to the strategy. Many times you hear people think, well, can I use innovation to define my strategy? And that's, I think innovation can inform the strategy and can help you identify where to point your gun, if you will, for growth and differentiation. But it's very important that when we start our innovation journey, we have a very clear vision of what is it that we want to accomplish with it. What is the purpose and what is innovation going to be serving in our organization? You have to define what am I going to do with that? And is it going to be primarily to drive new growth? I'm going to improve my current products. Where am I going to put my resources? And you have to define a how. And I think, as Luis was saying, there are a number of processes, there are tools, creativity, so on, that can help, and you have to make a choice and go after that. But it's important that it's with a common language, as Luis was saying, that the whole organization can understand and act upon. And one of the failure modes of innovation that I found in this long journey is that the constant reinvention of that can really stop your progress. So one of my areas of emphasis is maintaining this common language. So in this first phase, I'll share a little bit of tidbits of what we've been innovating about. And about 8 years ago, when we were getting this massive effort, one of the areas that we started to explore from a discovery perspective was, what can we do in other spaces of the home? So when you think about some of the the discovery lenses that we use, which actually are very close to what Imaginatic has in their discovery suite, we're challenging our own paradigms. We call them orthodoxies. And one of the orthodoxies that Whirlpool was facing is, why do we have to limit ourselves to be in the kitchen or in the laundry room? Those are the spaces that we are always in. So as we challenge that, we identified the garage as an opportunity. And our initial reaction as an appliance company was, well, we really have to start putting appliances in the garage. There's a need. People need a second refrigerator. So that was the idea. And as we went and immersed ourselves in the world of the garages, this is what we found. And what we realized is that if we want to sell appliances for the garage, we probably have to help them clean first. It will be very hard to put a solution there. So we started with an appliance. Actually, we started with a freezer because we realized that a lot of consumers mainly use the freezer on the outside of the garage. So we built a nice freezer and started an experiment. And everyone will come back and say, this is a good product, but I realize that this surface is helping a lot with my organizing my tools. I use this really as a working surface, not really as an appliance. So that gave us an idea to do another iteration, and we ended up with that product with some gadgets that will allow us to give some organization into the garage and maybe a nicer countertop. So we created the workbench freezer, I think we called it. And it was very, I think, a good success. And the feedback from consumers was, this is great, but everything I use is what's up here. I'm not using your freezer. Long story short, the idea of getting into the garage with appliances evolved into an organizational solution. And the only point I want to make with that is that innovation is a journey, and really allowing yourself to try and fail is what's going to make it work. So that was a long journey, and now that has become one of our businesses. That's the Gladiator brand, and there's a refrigerator back there. But the main purpose of this line is really an organizational brand. That was one of the first breakthroughs we have during this first phase of innovation. The second phase is what I call scale. And when you think about innovation and you want to make it a corporate-wide initiative, you have to think, well, what are the elements that I have to pull to make this work? And one of the first elements for us to make it work was that we have to give incentives to people to innovate. We have to give them a reason to do that. So we established a metric, and we can have a whole hour-long discussion on metrics, but we gave them a metric and we said, we think you have to get into your performance appraisals this important metric. You have to drive innovation. And the question that comes with that is really, what does innovation mean? I have this great product, this innovation, here's my innovation. And we would not get to a point where we could agree. So for us to be able to really scale this at an enterprise-wide level, we realized we needed to define very concretely what innovation meant. And that has been a very common principle throughout our innovation journey. But instead of giving you the innovation definition, for Whirlpool, I'll share with you how do we arrive at that definition, and what are the things that made us arrive to something that everyone will agree upon. So the first thing that we thought about is innovation has to serve a consumer purpose. We have to be able to have a unique solution for the consumers that is compelling, that is addressing a need that hasn't been addressed before. It's been addressed in a different way. It's been addressed in a compelling way for the consumer. So the example that you're seeing there, it's a washer. It's a washer for the Indian market. The Indian market is a relatively low-end market. And you will think, it's going to be very hard to get a premium product in the Indian market. At least have people pay slightly more than what they're paying. So we went and just got into the homes of the Indian consumer, which has its nuances and is a little bit different. We found that in many homes in India, people don't have water right next to the washer, so they have to be moving around the machine. So you will have people moving their machine from one place to another. When they were done, they will bring it back. So first need, it's got to be very easy to move, and the woman of the house, which is typically who stays, has to be the person that is actually moving it. We also found that the people doing the laundry would bend a lot. They will have to do a lot of folding, more than we will typically do, because they have very different types of garments. They have some special garments, and there will be a lot of manual work involved in the process. So we had to find a solution for it. And then lastly, we found that the saris that they have are very large, and they will need a solution that will enable them to wash these large items. And some of the offerings in the market will not be able to have that capacity. So that's the solution that we found. Actually, that washer that you see there, it addresses those three needs. It has wheels. It's very compelling from a aesthetic standpoint. The ring that you see on the top, it's something that you can remove. So you can do the folding there, and there's a station that will allow the consumers to actually do a lot of that work on-site. So number one, if it's in the market, and if it's not compelling to consumers, it's not addressing an unmet need, will not be innovation. I think that's the most obvious part of the definition. But the second element for us was, we don't want that to be a one-time win. It needs to be sustainable over time. And there are many ways to achieve that. The most obvious way to doing that in our industry, at least, is to find patents. We have to protect our innovation. We file patents against our technologies or ideas. But there are other ways of driving sustainable growth, which could be finding new models, new business models, maybe partnering with someone, creating some barriers of entry. In this particular case, this product was protected from a design standpoint. Actually, a very unique win for this product, because as soon as it was introduced, we had some copycat versions, and we were able to get them out of the market because they were infringing in our design, in our industrial design. So innovation is also about creating that sustainable protection. Okay? So not only from that perspective, but also over time. And there are other ways in which we do that by defining migration paths of our products and introducing them in a cadence. And the third element of our innovation definition is really about creating a differentiated shareholder value. We need to make sure that innovation is really something that consumers are recognizing in the marketplace. And we're measuring that from an EOP perspective and looking at a difference, product versus product. So at the end of the day, we're looking at having a very specific way of looking what is innovation and not. And that allows us to manage our portfolio, our investments, and be able to drive the right behaviors throughout the organization. So that's one example of how we can drive a scale. There are many other ways in which we can drive a scale. And I will finish this section by sharing how we actually scale that definition. So what we did is created one standard process of identifying if our innovation or if our product was innovative or not, that will allow the teams to actually reflect on those three elements that I shared with you, and then go on and get the resources for our projects. Ultimately, what this allows us to do is people in the finance world that are making the bets on capital and deciding where we're going to go, they can look at a portfolio and say what is innovation and what's not, and we can fine-tune that over time. The third phase of innovation, the way we've looked at that in Whirlpool, I call it open notch, really thinking about how do you optimize to the times. And I see this as maybe as a dial, a set of dials where you move areas into the management system that allows us to put the emphasis where it needs to be put over time. And there's a lot in this chart, but what it really shows is what are the different things that you can do to drive the behavior throughout the organization. And as Luis was saying, it's all about people. So this is, every time we go through the cycle of profit planning, we're reflecting what are the things that we're going to do this year to move the needle in innovation. And what you see there are a number of things that are part of the consideration set. In these times at Whirlpool, it's really about looking at our expansion to extend and get beyond our core business. Obviously, as a product company, we're very focused on getting innovation in our core business, being relevant, staying relevant, and that's what we do every day. But there's also an imperative of growth beyond the core. And if you think about the dials that I was sharing, there are a number of things that we can do as an organization to drive the growth in those areas that you see to the right. Okay. Where do you allocate resources? Do you have teams working on specifically on these areas? How do you get to ideas that can actually be compelling in that space, so on and so forth? So if you think about the changes that we've seen throughout Whirlpool in the innovation world, I go back to our basics. And we started with the sea of white. And when you look at that picture there, you can see how innovation has transformed our corporation. Let me just ask a few questions from the audience. And what types of things do you see in that picture that tell you that there are unique and compelling solutions for the customer that are different than what we had before? Anyone wants to take a guess from what you see there? I think you hit on the most important ones, at least. First of all, a simple solution like a pedestal really changed the way consumers interacted with the product. That seems like a very obvious thing, but it didn't exist before. And you can think from a consumer perspective, and I think to an audience like this, I can share a little bit of the inside story of this. Just think of the mechanics and the engineering that is required to do a pedestal. Probably very small. But when you think about the value that you deliver through it to the consumers and what they're willing to pay for, very good for the company. Then the capacity, obviously, has really dramatically changed in the way the consumers interact with the product, from bending to having it right in front of them. Then you have the work surface, so really organizing the whole laundry room. It's a whole different way of looking at this. You're offering a solution beyond the utilitarian washing clothes to really getting to other aspects of the process. So really looking at this from a consumer perspective, from where they start to when they end, really changed our mindset through it. But at the end of the day, in companies, we are in this for value creation. Innovation is serving the business to create value. And here it's a picture of how that is reflected in this particular example. When you think about the picture I was sharing with you at the beginning, average prices coming down, and look at this, we started with a washer-dryer pair that was probably about $700 for the consumer. As we add the functionality, the pedestals, so on and so forth, people started to now not only buy the washer when they broke, but they will need to buy the pair because they look alike, they look nice, and they seem to go better together. So now you're creating a need for those two products together as opposed to what it used to be independently. You add the pedestals, and then we add style and color, and that continues to bring that up. So we have to look at these pictures not only from a consumer perspective. We believe that the value for the consumer is very critical, and it's proven because they're willing to invest in this. But from a company perspective, our shareholders like this, and the picture of the average price really changed. Let me see, I skipped one slide here. There it is. So when you look at what has happened since we challenged ourselves with a sea of white, a lot of change has happened. We continue to face challenges with competition. But Whirlpool has really expanded into different categories. We have some products that are consumables. We have really changed the space in which our products operate and the way our consumers perceive us. From an innovation management perspective, what I'll share with you as a lesson learned is that this journey never ends. You will think of innovation. I think we started this notion of innovation as a traditional maturity model, where we would get to the point where we break through and are able to just create an operational efficiency, In reality is that through these phases, we've had to continue to reinvent our capabilities, reinvent ourselves on how we're doing it. And I think the biggest lesson for us is that we have to have our antennas up all the time, thinking of this from a strategic standpoint and meeting the businesses where they are, because that's really what will allow us to get initiatives going. Innovation is ultimately a mindset. I think instilling that mindset into your innovation teams, but every business leader is really what can really change the game. And we talk a lot about innovation principles, and I think a simpler way to saying that is really instilling that mindset. So a lot of the work that we do is how do we get that injected into the way the businesses operate. That's what I have to share. I think we have about 4 minutes, so maybe we can open it for questions. Back there? Yep.
With the slackers in the back of the room. Can you just say a little bit more about the metrics that you use when you talked about kind of doing performance appraisals? Like, how do you build that in terms of knowing if a person or if a department is being innovative enough?
The metrics are founded on the innovation definition that I shared with you. What we do is we look at that from 3 phases in the commercialization process, starting with the front end. We have a different name for that, but basically before the commercialization, we're building what we call an innovation funnel, which is basically, all of those ideas that are still a little bit undefined or the spaces that we're after. Once they get into the commercialization process, we have what we call the pipeline, which is basically now the engineering process of getting the product ready to go to market. In both of those, we measure what we call a steady state revenue. So what do we project they'll be able to generate when they get to that point that it's an ongoing stream. Then as a rear view mirror perspective, we have an innovation revenue. So how much of innovation revenue are these products generating in the market? So under that, there are a lot of nuances of how we measure that. As I was sharing, we have an innovation definition. And when we get to the tactics of it, the products that actually meet that definition get flagged into an enterprise system. So when we get reporting, we can actually look at that. So I think what's interesting about this from a lesson perspective is that we have really built or treated innovation as a business process. So when we go into business managerial reviews and we look at our P&L, there are elements of innovation in that work that say, where is the pipeline? How is the health of the pipeline? Do we have to inject more on one or the other? And even that, even in the marketplace, we don't have a lot of time to dig deeper on this, but we have a part of the process that is focused on extracting value from the innovation, what's in the market, because even though we have all these great things that the product may have, that's not enough to make it succeed in the market. So there are a lot of elements of the process that are also applied to making sure that we're extracting value.
I was going to try shouting, but I figured this works better. So we heard earlier about this idea of low-hanging fruit, to avoid low-hanging fruit, to avoid the quick hits. You showed some innovation where the price that a consumer would spend goes from $700, 4x to $3,000. Part of that, to me, is a little bit of low-hanging fruit by increasing the number of things I can buy and how much I spend. Can you talk about maybe taking that deeper and how innovation helps you increase the margin or the utility on that $700 appliance so that no more spend for me, but much more value for Whirlpool?
There are a lot of opportunities like that. For me, the most important thing is to create a balance in the portfolio and to establish a vision for each business. So the way we define that is every business has a sets of domains, and each domain or platform, if you will, has a consumer vision that we want to accomplish. And there are some that are very close to us and that could be delivered in the short term. There are so many others that look almost unrealistic. And being able to put your resources in that full continuum is what we think can get us away from it. So from an enterprise perspective, the challenge has been to get our investments towards some of those things that are not just around the corner. And I think when we get to that point, then you can establish a cadence and you can establish a commitment with the business, but there's always a scarcity of resources. So where do you put them? And being able to get the businesses to establish that vision and put a long-term view, that's, for me, one of the most important elements to achieve that balance. I think there was a question here.
Thanks. So you talked us through what changes Whirlpool encountered over the last maybe 15 or so years in general, maybe a little longer. Was there a specific corporate change that initiated that, or was it a more organic change that took place that you've built on and figured out how to do it right?
They started with a very bold move from our previous CEO. And what he said is we have to figure out how to do innovation. So there was a pilot, and the pilot was, let's bring an innovation company. At the time, it was Gary Hamel, who actually started the notion of the organization is the one that can become an innovative entity. So we brought him, and we ran a small pilot. And then the bold move was to get 25 people from every region in our company and get them together for a year and learn all these notion of innovation process and so on and so forth. And then all of them went back to the regions and were charged with implementing that in every region. So it really took that. That's the history of the, say, 4 or 5 first years. In the current environment, it's more about this organic growth of the innovation capability. And I think what Luis was saying is absolutely true. In my role, a lot of what I do is meeting with the businesses where they are and making sure that they find the relevance of innovation in their business so they can continue. And that's really an organic way of continuing to build the capability. I'm sorry, I don't have chocolate. Okay. Sounds great. Well, thanks, everyone. Glad you with Jim.